Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen. Come, Holy Ghost, fill the hearts of thy faithful, and enkindle in them the fire of thy divine love. Send forth thy Spirit, and they shall be created.
And now shall renew the face of the earth.
Let us pray. O God, who by the light of the Holy Ghost didst instruct the hearts of the faithful, grant us in that same Spirit that we may be truly wise and to ever rejoice in his consolation, through the same Christ our Lord.
Amen.
May the divine assistance remain always with us.
May the souls of the faithful be mercy of God, rest in peace. Amen.
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen. So we are on the fifth commandment, middle of page 82. Oh yeah, back on that other stuff we were doing last week, the Freemasons and stuff. There are various organizations that officially are not tied to the main body of Freemasonry, but really are. Like Demolay, for example. They say, oh, we're not Freemasons, but they're a secret society that probably plots against the church. It's their junior G-men kind of version of Freemasons, which is very interesting because Demolay was the last Grand Master of the Knights Templar, and the Freemasons have this affair with the Knights Templar kind of going. So whenever you see Demolay on this, you know what to say. And in fact, the Freemasons have a branch called the Knights Templar. They also have a branch called the Knights of Malta. They're pure Freemasons. They're not anything to do with the real Knights Templar or the real Knights of Malta or anything like that. But it was curious because the other day I was driving by my neighborhood and I went a certain way on a street that I don't normally go in, so I saw a slightly different scenario. And there's a Planned Parenthood clinic not too far from my house. And the name of the little business park is the Demolay Business Park. And I thought that was an interesting connection there. Who knows, who knows what goes on. Anyway, and so there's other ones like the, some, like the Moose Lodge is fairly harmless, that kind of thing. Rotary Club, that's harmless. What is it, Toastmasters or whatever, those things. They're just fraternal organizations. Every fraternal organization isn't necessarily plotting and having designs on people in the church and things like that.
How about the Knights of Columbus?
Yeah, the Knights of Columbus. People get a little confused with regards sometimes to organizations like the Knights of Columbus. For example, we're forbidden to join a secret organization. And they go, well, the Knights of Columbus has secrets. Well, the only secrets in the Knights of Columbus, the only secrets they have are, they have a little initiation ceremony for each level. And you're not supposed to go out and tell people that haven't done it yet what it is, because there are little surprises in it. There's nothing evil in it. So it's not a secret organization in that sense. But they're lost too. It's not like they're in conjunction with anybody that's evil. But I remember my old Knights of Columbus chapter in Mobile, Alabama. They used to freak out the Protestants because you have your Knights of Columbus with the emblem on it's like a baseball cap, right, that you can get. Has your Knights of Columbus badge there, and then it has your council number above it. Well, our council was 666. So the Bible thumpers really loved that one. See, I told you, Bernice. So they actually changed the number of it. You just received the number in the order your application was accepted, but they actually changed it and got another. But anyway, by the time I left there, they were having joint pancake breakfasts with the Freemasons that were down the street to show how wonderful and open and ecumenical we are and that kind of thing. So, and I don't know that goes on everywhere, but there are certain things about the Knights of Columbus. Like one of my good friends, Father John Geary, who was my Latin and Greek teacher in high school, God rest his soul, but he was the state chaplain for them. And he couldn't get them to even think about ousting Knights of Columbus members that pretended to be Catholic but were pro-abortion politicians. They wouldn't do it. So he kind of distanced himself from that. So, you know, whatever. The Knights of Columbus, as it was originally set up, was nothing more than a men's Catholic fraternal organization. And I suppose maybe in some places still is.
Thank you.
Are there any secret societies in Nova Scotia?
Not that I know of.
What about Order of Malta also?
Well, Knights of Malta's,
Knights of Malta.
that's not a secret society. That's just that's an order of chivalry. That's descended from the Knights Hospitallers of the Crusades. And there's really nothing secret about it. So, anyway, we're down to now the 5th commandment here, making progress little by little. Do we get rid of the kid? Well, see, in another page is going to be sex ed. So, I had to get rid of one of the little ones because I wasn't sure that, you know, her ears were ready for that kind of thing. We do the 6th and 9th commandment after we finish up the 5th commandment here. So anybody who's squeamish about that kind of thing, you might want to leave now. Because, well, this is catechism after all, right? The 5th commandment is thou shalt not kill. Without this commandment, there would be no security for the life of man, either for his physical life or his spiritual life. So think about it. There's one sense in which the 5th commandment comes from the natural law, in that I think everybody realizes that if it were okay to go around killing everyone at will, that wouldn't be good for anyone, really. You know, maybe, you know, we have the belief, as I do, that some people are alive merely because it's illegal to kill them. However, you know, when you think about it, well, that if I think it's okay to kill somebody else, then somebody else is going to think it's okay to kill me. So we have to, you know, have some sort of agreement, and happily God gave us that in the form of a commandment. Now, as I said before, thou shalt not kill means more that thou shalt not take an innocent life, thou shalt not murder, than absolutely thou shalt not kill. Because I've heard people, you know, on the radio, vegans and vegetarians and things trying to apply it to cows, you know. Oh, you Christians, or whatever, Jews and stuff, you say thou shalt not kill, and then you eat meat. And it's like, okay. Yeah. I've heard it. Huh? And then they're killing plants. You know, plants are alive, and according to them, they also have feelings and, you know, auras and whatnot. So I guess we'll just have to eat dirt then.
Well, there's amoebas on dirt.
Huh?
There's amoebas on dirt.
Well, just we're not safe anywhere now, are we?
No.
Can't even eat dirt.
So life is man's greatest good, so God wishes to safeguard it against attack. God alone is the author of life. He alone may take life. Apart from the circumstances of a just war, the execution of a criminal, and legitimate self-defense. Mind you, just war is an extension of self-defense. Self-defense is 101. Just war is national self-defense, as it were. So the 5th commandment forbids willful murder, which is one of the sins crying to heaven for vengeance, because it usurps God's right over life. Now we need to be very clear about this. God has the right over life and over death. God is the only one with that right that is proper to his being. And you can see through then the ramblings of these people who are like, they want assisted suicide, they want the right to die, you know, this kind of thing. Well, the fact that you're born means you're going to die. But it doesn't necessarily follow that you have the moral authority to make that decision. And we hear all kinds of stories, you know, they always put the one on the news about so-and-so who's suffering a long, drawn-out, painful death, and, you know, it's just so ridiculous that I can't, you know, in this state yet go to my doctor and get an overdose and just, they say dying with dignity and all this kind of nonsense, but that's what it is. It's just nonsense. You have to have a foundation of what the real principles are. The real principle is God alone gives life and God alone takes life. Outside of the cases, the 3 cases mentioned above, of just war, execution of a criminal, and self-defense. All right? Yeah. And you can see where abortion has ended the life of many, many millions upon millions of innocent babies. And a side effect of it, collateral damage if you will, direct effect maybe, is the lessening of the preciousness of life in the common mentality, you see. Think about it. Our society legalizes killing the most innocent people that there are. Unborn babies, where they're supposed to be safe and being taken care of, they're ripped out and murdered on a daily basis by the millions, okay? Now, if it's okay to do that, then why not later? There really, immorally, is no distinction, except that an unborn baby is more innocent than someone who's reached an age where they can sin, okay? So they're even more innocent, and they haven't been baptized, which makes that worse. But there is no moral distinction between killing that baby and killing someone else. And we have, Sarah, if you move that way a little bit, I'll actually be able to see you better. You don't have to keep on trying to duck your sister there. Perfect. There is a sort of thing like a collective consciousness, not in the spacey New Age sense, but what I mean is a mentality that you get from a culture or a society or this kind of thing, and that rubs off on you. And this idea that it's okay to kill babies runs off on the entire society. So that without maybe deducing it logically and verbalizing it, their respect for life is lessened. You have to know that if you can kill a baby and that's okay, then, and you think it's okay, then you have to think it's okay to kill somebody later. Because there is no distinction more. All right? And that's what's happening. We have people who are just engaging in the most brazen of murders all over our society and around the world. And I think it's directly related to the whole abortion thing. I think, funnily enough, it's related to communion in the hand, believe it or not. I went and see Mother Teresa once, back in the late 70s. She was in San Francisco speaking at something, my mom and I and some other people from church went to hear her. And she was asked, Mother Teresa, what is the greatest evil in the world? And they were going, she's going to say abortion. She said communion in the hand was the greatest evil, even to her, worse than abortion. So I see a real relationship, too, between abortion and communion in the hand and the loss of respect for life in general. Because if you build disrespect for the Blessed Sacrament into the official worship of the Church, then that rubs off on people, too. There is nowhere that practices communion in the hand that does it respectfully. And I'll tell you what I mean. And some of you have heard me say it before, but when you put the host into somebody's hand, when I give a host to somebody on their tongue, there's an altar boy following me around with a paten, and there's a reason for that. It's because there's particles that come off of the host from time to time. Every one of those particles is God. That is Jesus. Body, blood, soul, and divinity. And when they put it in their hands, when they have communion in their hand, they don't purify their hands. So you have, at any one Mass, in a big parish, perhaps thousands of particles of, that's our Lord in the Blessed Sacrament being trod underfoot. They have no purification method for communion in the hand, you see? So, anyway, that builds itself into the collective consciousness of the church, so that they lessen respect for God himself by doing things like communion in the hand.
But Monsignor, even more so than that, their hands haven't been consecrated.
Not
even-
consecrated, not probably even washed.
Right.
In a
So
while,
it's like, how dare they even think that they're worthy? I mean, that seems.
No, and in fact, not to get off at a tangent because we'll cover that later. Communion in the hand began by the Protestants as a sign that they rejected transubstantiation. They rejected the notion of Christ being present under the forms of bread and wine.
Do you know, Monsignor, if there's any literature of Mother Teresa talking about that exact subject?
I don't know, but you might look it up. I mean, I'm sure somebody put it on some website if I heard it.
Because that would be pretty hard hitting for the Novus Ordo, because she kind of does have a following, through the Novus
Oh,
Ordo.
yeah. Yeah, you might Google,
Yeah,
see what you can do.
So in the Novus Ordo, they still have like washing of the hands and all in the new Mass.
I mean, for the priest?
Yes.
Yeah. But not for the faithful.
So what's
No,
like? What's
but
the
I just
purpose
didn't
then?
know like if it was they were still following the same procedure.
They do that, yes.
What was their justification for changing it? Is there
You want to know? There were large chunks of the church, the same ones who gave us modernism in the first place, namely France and Germany, who were doing it anyway. And basically they said, well, they're doing it anyway, we might as well say they can do it.
sounds like a good idea?
I know, I could think of a lot of other things we can start in that case. But when I was living in France, somebody had a hand missile. Like, we have the Lassance missile. And it was from the 40s, like 1941, I think it was. And it was a regular printed, hand-bound, bound black missile like any of us would use it now. Front page was a picture. And what was the picture? Communion in the hand. 1941. You see? In France. They were already doing it in France and Germany. And they never stopped them. So all they did was say it was okay. And the reason why they okayed it is because they wanted to be ecumenical with the Protestants, Oh, let's approve one of their practices and then we'll all get along so nicely. And stuff,
Didn't Saint Faustina or Faustina receive communion in the hand?
Oh, I
in
know.
One of the,
Oh, there was some sort of, part of a vision or something like
Yes.
that? Yes.
and that's why I think the popes canceled it out.
Canceled. Yes.
How about the Synod of Rouen, Monsignor?
Wait. What?
When I lived in France in the late 50s and 60s, when we go to Mass, we had to walk up to the altar, right to the altar, take crust of bread out of one pan and put it in another pan. Then time for communion, he would take that bread, dip it in wine, put it in our mouth, sometimes your hands. We couldn't figure out what was going on.
And that was in the 50s.
In 50s and early 60s.
Even before that was heard of anywhere else.
But we'd go right up to the altar, we'd touch the altar and everything.
Sure. Yeah, they were already far gone. I'm sorry, now what was it, Lucille? The Council of
The Synod of Rouen.
Rouen?
Yeah.
What about it?
Like, I think it excommunicated everyone.
Oh, well, then, that's easy then. But for what? Putting communion in the hand?
Condemn them for receiving Holy Communion
In the hand? Well, that's a good, what year was that? What year was it?
Excommunicated everybody.
Yeah, that's quite a ways back there. And the way they justified it later, they said, well, it was an early practice of the church. Well, it may have been, or may not have been, but in any case, the church did away with it, a long, long time ago. And they're going, well, look at the Last Supper, Christ gave them all. Well, they were all bishops at the Last Supper, for heaven's sakes. So it wasn't really the same thing.
So it was excommunication.
Right. But that was the old church,
Oh, yeah,
you
that's,
see.
what do you belong to that?
Yes, but yeah.
Okay, we know Mother Teresa was canonized recently. Do you consider him as...
She's not, though. She was beatified.
She was beatified? Okay. All right. So,
Oh, but, mind you, she's somebody was telling me the other day, there's somebody who worked for the diocese, and they told me that who else? It was going to be canonized soon. They were telling me was Dorothy Day and Thomas Merton. I
Canada?
said, are you kidding? I mean, why not? Oh, no. I mean, how about, Saint Adolf and Saint Heinrich, and Saint Joseph. Let's just canonize all the major Nazi, figures. Huh? Yeah. Oh yeah, Mengele, Saint Doctor of the Church. It's just crazy. It's absolutely. It's out of control. Okay. So, willful murder, obviously, abortion, suicide, when it's willful self-murder, we went into that. Many suicides, if not most, are a result of depression and some kind of a mental illness. And in that, the moral responsibility is either lessened or it's not there at all. It's very rarely there will be a person that's completely in charge of their faculties and decide to kill themselves. I think that's a very, very rare thing. Exposing one's life or health to unnecessary danger without sufficient cause, i.e. deciding you're going to jump out of an airplane with a parachute when you don't happen to be a paratrooper, and you have a family and kids and a wife that are relying on you. Fighting, that doesn't mean just what your parents do. That means, real, slugging kind of stuff, physical fighting. And the reason that's wrong is because, first of all, when people fight, they're trying to injure each other, which is bad enough, but as it escalates, it may become even worse than that. And so it can be a sin against the Fifth Commandment. Quarreling, which tends towards fighting and even murder. Injurious words, and which lead to quarrels and their consequences. Scandal, which is any word, deed, or omission wrong or seeming to be wrong and leading others to sin. So, basically, bad example. Bad example is especially when somebody knows that you are Catholic and they're looking to you to represent other Catholics, and you comport yourself badly and scandalously in any way, really. Some ways are worse than others, but anyway, that's the nature of scandal. It's especially bad when you scandalize children because they're very impressionable. So you have to be very careful what you say around them and teach them and that kind of thing. In fact, our Lord said, he that shall scandalize one of these little ones that believe in me, it were better for him that a millstone should be hanged around his neck and that he should be drowned in the depth of the sea. That would be better for him than what's waiting for him on the other side if he doesn't repent of that. Oh, a millstone, by the way, is not just a little thing you decorate your garden with. The smallest millstone I've ever seen is about this wide and about that thick and probably weighed 2 tons, So you can imagine. Huh?
It's only one half this piece that goes on top.
Yeah, and it's only one half, There are two, the one that moves around and the one that stays put to grind up whatever it is you're grinding up. So when you think about that, a 1 or 2 ton or more thing tied around your neck and thrown in the ocean, straight down, right? I guess it's kind of symbolic going straight down. So that example is really kind of contained in scandal. Evil like fever is contagious, especially with the young. Anger, which leads to quarrels and many other evils, whosoever is angry with his brother shall be in danger of the judgment. It is sinful, especially when shown for a merely accidental. So you know people that just fly off, they just go from zero to really upset about trivialities. That's what they're talking about there. You know, we should be very slow to anger, but there's just some people are hotheads, you call them. You know, we've heard of hotheads. Well, that's that. Now, not all anger is sinful either. There is a kind of a just anger where you have a moral, you are upset with somebody from a point of view of moral indignation. It's not the kind of anger that you want to do them any kind of physical harm. You may pray that God does them some kind of physical harm to stop them from doing, usually the very sinful or criminal thing they're doing. But having a moral indignation, which is called righteous anger, is not a sin in itself. The problem is you have to control that pretty well because it can lead into just out of control anger. See, it says, St. Paul even says, we go to the bottom here, he says, be angry and sin not. Interesting, because a lot of people think anger is a sin, and how does that fit? But those are kind, let not the sun go down upon your anger. Now see, that's just a good practical thing. If you are upset with somebody, angry even, you don't let it eat you out overnight. You go and you settle that somehow before the sun sets. That's the commandment of God right there. And it's a very prudent thing to do. Even though, well, married couples can have these things where then they don't talk to each other for like 3 days. Well, you should at least try, not to let the sun set on your anger.
So that's already mortal sin, Monsignor.
What we mean being ticked off for 3 days in a row? No, it doesn't. It doesn't necessarily make it a mortal sin. It's a lack of charity, maybe not to a mortally sinful degree. Huh?
It's like very painful in your
Of course it is, yeah, but it's not necessarily a mortal sin either. Now, hatred. Hatred's one of those things, well, we these days use it to represent a lot of more mild kind of condition than real hatred actually is. We go, oh, I hate that, or oh, I just hate her, or I just hate him, or I just hate it, or whatever. And it just means, I just don't like that, or whatever. There's some exceptions, like I really hate fish, and that's true. I really do. So, but otherwise, with people, when they say, oh, I just hate him, or her, or whatever, they're just meaning, oh, they're so boring or crude or whatever, I don't like to be around them. But real hatred, the true hatred necessarily involves a desire to do away with another person. Okay, and that's the kind of, when we're forbidden to have hatred, that's what we're forbidden from, because it's contrary to charity. God commands us to love our neighbor as part of the great commandment, right? Love God above all things, and your neighbor as yourself, or love God. So we're not allowed to hate anyone. We can really dislike somebody or being in their presence for one or more, sometimes very good reasons. But that isn't the same thing as hatred. And if that's the case, we should still at least pray for the person.
Monsignor, we've talked about how religion is not a feeling.
Right.
But, we're entitled to have our feelings about things. Like if somebody does something to you or says something to you and you feel bad about that, it's okay to have those kinds
Oh,
of
sure, you
feelings.
can hardly avoid those kinds of
Okay,
things.
and then you just have
No,
to,
but my caution was don't equate religion with feeling.
right, right.
Because, to some people, it's all this, they call them phenomenologists. John Paul II was a phenomenologist. It's for him, feeling was everything. And for lots of different people, their whole religion is feeling. It's feeling good, and I'm so saved, and the more I tell myself I'm saved, the better I feel, etc., and I get warm fuzzies, and that's what it's all about. And of course, that's not what religion is all about. But having feelings because of one thing or another, no, of course.
And you just have to you just have to figure out how to get past that feeling. I mean, if somebody hurts you really badly, and you're really upset, and you feel sad, and you feel angry, then somehow you have to work that out so
You
that
have to
you
work it
don't.
out and at least get to the point where you don't wish that person any harm and you have to pray for them.
Okay, well, if you don't wish them harm to begin with, but you're just really upset with what they did, and you brood about it for a couple days, I mean, I don't know
That's
if women
all.
do it better than, women have it more than men, but, our nature is that we're very sensitive, at least most of us, and
No,
so,
but that's all right.
okay, so we can be sad for a short period of
Sad,
time.
you can be upset with somebody, just so long as in the end you don't wish them any harm and you try to pray for them.
So that's not like holding a grudge if like you have a fight or something and you're just not like,
Well, but you can't hold a grudge, right? You have to get past that somehow.
Right, yeah, well, holding a grudge means you haven't forgiven somebody, really.
oh, right, okay.
No, it doesn't mean you turn into like a, babe in the woods kind of thing
Right.
with everybody either. You still have your memory of what somebody did to you, and it's good to remember they could do it again and treat them accordingly.
It's just
You know?
fine. So, but there is some sense of feeling equated with religion.
I won't deny there's some sense of feeling that you can associate with, but just remember that's not religion.
Right, no, I'm always trying to decipher it because sometimes I feel like one can be more avid, because of how they feel inside
Sure.
than another person.
Yeah, you can definitely be more fired up about religion or less fired up. The thing to watch out for is the notion that you're equating a feeling with some like for example, somebody goes to confession, right? And sometimes you come out of confession and it's just, oh, I feel great, I've got all that off my chest and now I feel, much better about the whole thing. You're walking on air. And there's sometimes where you can come out of a confession after having confessed exactly the same thing and you don't feel much. And you start to worry, oh no, I don't feel forgiven. Uh-oh. Well, and then that's where it gets dicey.
Right.
Because then they go, oh, I don't feel forgiven. What do I do now? I'll have to go in and do it again. And so they do, and they still don't feel forgiven. And, then that's the point where we have to realize, well,
Right,
you may not feel forgiven, but you are, because Christ gave us confession, so you're going to be forgiven.
So according to Paul, what do you be angry? What does that mean? I mean, I could never get it. This is nuts. And also, how do you go from just anger to righteous anger, like Jesus? Like, how do you discern the difference? And how can you?
Well, it depends. Okay, it depends if you're actually wishing harm to somebody, and it depends if your object of the anger is for a morally good purpose. So, Christ threw the money changers out of the temple, and he showed righteous anger because they made his father's house, kind of a den of thieves kind of thing. The money changers were doing a kind of business there. It's like Jimmy the Greek, doing this little, money changing and betting and stuff like that. It was something along those lines. But he didn't wish, he was incapable of sin. So even though he got roused to an indignation to drive them out, he never sinned. Well, in the same way, you can be offended and roused to a moral indignation over something, but you don't lose it and wish harm on the person who's offended. You know?
So be angry means like, is it like 24/7?
It means no. When he said be angry, he says, okay, you can get angry, but don't let that, be careful that doesn't lead you into sin.
Sounds like a command, so be angry, like, oh.
Well, I don't think it is. It's don't worry, be happy. Is the command.
Like you get hurt with a certain person, and then, so, it seems to me like I won't, if I just ignore him, or,
What's this now?
like when somebody gets, I got angry with a person because he did something to me, and then, so I just avoid him. Yeah, when,
Depends on the situation,
yeah, so I'm not saying I avoid him and, don't talk to
If
him.
avoiding him is your way of not sinning, then that's all right. Sometimes people can offend, and then, you get angry, but you don't want that to lead into sin, so you kind of withdraw from the situation. And there are times when entering into the proximity of the offender will maybe risk leading you into real anger, and so you avoid it. That makes sense.
Like, you just ignore it?
Well, whatever floats your boat. I mean, whatever it takes to not sin. So,
As long as I don't have this hatred in me anymore.
right. Which, try not to have in the first place.
Thank you.
Because that's hatred. Now, revenge, final little thing there, which is returning evil for evil. And the Lord says, revenge is mine, and I will repay them in due time. He that seeketh to revenge himself shall find vengeance from the Lord. Be not overcome by evil, but overcome evil by good. How can a man who is seeking revenge sincerely say in the Our Father, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us? It is important to remember that injuries caused to others must be repaired. If, for instance, we have led others to sin through scandal, everything possible must be done to bring them back to God. So in the revenge, just remember that first line. It's returning evil for evil. Somebody does something to you, and you want to do that same thing or worse back to them. Now, we have the bit about turning the other cheek, but remember, God is our avenger. He will set everything, all the accounts will be settled in the next life. So it's not really up to us to have vengeance. It's not even a good thing. That's something like taking the law into your own hands. I mean, as inefficient as the court system is, if somebody murders your friend or relative, you shouldn't go out and try to murder them. They should be handed over to the legal system to be dealt with. And if they don't do a good job there, well, then they're going to die someday, and God's going to fill in the gaps, I mean, the worst that can happen is in this state, they'll be on death row until they die of natural causes at the age 104.
So that said, Monsignor, revenge is mine, I will repay it.
Right. You have to hand it over to the Lord.
Does anyone have a testimony for that?
Huh?
Does anyone have a testimony regarding that?
A testimony?
Yeah, like the way God takes vengeance on your behalf.
I'm sorry?
The way God takes
The way
vengeance
God-
on your behalf.
Well, that's usually done in the afterlife, So no, I don't think we have any real good people who have appeared after death to tell us stories about that. All right, here we go. Sex ed. Page 85. Commandments 6 and 9. Okay, we'll try to make this as nice as possible. The 6th commandment is, thou shalt not commit adultery. And of course, the 9th commandment is, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. And the sins against these commandments are so very similar that we lump them together under almost one big commandment, 6 and 9. So, what does the 6th commandment forbid? The 6th commandment in general forbids all sins of impurity, including adultery, fornication, masturbation, birth control, homosexual acts, and bestiality, and specifically those sins of impurity committed with another's wife or husband. But like so many of the commandments, it says, thou shalt not commit adultery. Now, here's what adultery is. Okay, 2 young kids dating each other get carried away and do something together they shouldn't be doing, right? That's not adultery, because they're not married. Marriage is people who are married not to each other, at least one of them, doing something they shouldn't be doing with each other. That is adultery. The kids who get carried away and do something, that's fornication. So there's a distinction. Well, you see, since we apply theology to what we know from God's revelation, we don't just say, well, adultery is forbidden. So as long as we're not married, we can, do anything we want to, right? Because God doesn't say anything about that. Well, would that it were that simple. And probably no one would ever get married. Because, it's like, well, as long as we're not married, we're not sinning, so forget it. These other things, other sins actually are covered by these commandments, although the wording might not be specific, So when it says adultery, it means lots of things. Just as coveting thy neighbor's wife, well, let's see. I'm not coveting my neighbor's wife, I'm coveting the wife 2 doors down, right? So then that's okay too, right? So theology sorts these things out for us and gives the commandments their fuller meaning. There we go. Okay, so the 6th commandment in general forbids all those things listed there. Does it also forbid whatever is contrary to holy purity? Of course. It forbids whatever is contrary to holy purity in words, thoughts, looks, or actions. Are immodest plays and dances forbidden by the 6th commandment? They are, of course, and it is sinful to look at them. Immodest plays. I suppose there's lots of them out there, but we don't tend to encounter them in our rarefied atmosphere here. But,
Most of the plays are immodest.
Yeah, but we don't. It's not like we're going to have an immodest play at Padre Pio Academy. I mean, there are a lot of immodest plays, but you have to go to LA or something usually to see them, right? Does the 6th commandment forbid immodest songs, books, pictures, movies, TV shows, and websites? Of course it does. I'm sure some of this was added because this was written before there were websites. So, the 6th commandment also forbids immodest songs, books, pictures, movies, TV shows, and websites because they are most dangerous to the soul and lead to mortal sin. The internet is one of the most wonderful things that there is. And it's also one of the most dangerous if you use it badly. There are things available at your fingertips that are marvelous and then extremely evil. And you have to have a large amount of self-control when you approach these things. People get tempted and go and look for stuff they shouldn't look for, and it's all too easy. When I was younger, mostly the worst you could do was go to the barber shop you know, and every barber had a subscription to Playboy. And so it's like, okay, I'm not supposed to be looking at that, but, you know, I can see the cover anyway. Oh, that guy's looking at it, I could look over his shoulder and see it. And then there was the substitute, which was the National Geographic, because, you know, it showed shamelessly dressed or undressed women in tribes of the Middle America. But that was about, you know, that was about it, and you had to go out of your way for these things. Now, any kid that can get access to the internet can see stuff that is just horrifying to mind and soul by clicking a few buttons, you know. So it's one of those things we have to be really, really careful about. You have to understand the principle. It's like in computer programming. You've heard the term GIGA, garbage in, garbage out. It means that whatever you program into your computer, if it's bad, then you're going to get bad results from it. If it's good, you're going to get good results. Well, our souls are like that through the input of our senses. And we have to exercise a certain vigilance. Kitty in the room, kitty in the room. Mix the topics. You know, you have to exercise a vigilance because people are far too careless, far too unaware of what the bad input actually does to them or how it affects their souls. You know, they go down by little degrees. Oh, you know, I like this, you know, rock music isn't that bad, and this kind of thing. Whereas they don't realize the subtleties of rock music. Music insinuates itself into your soul much easier than, what was that?
Okay, my car alarm decided to go off.
Oh.
Just took my keys.
It insinuates itself into your soul far easier than people give it credit for. So what can be wrong with rock is not so much necessarily the words, although a lot of rock words are just trashy anyway, but the rhythms of rock are specifically designed, either by Satan or the people who wrote them, to have a sexual effect, a sexual rhythm. And that's what it is. These, you know, a lot of it comes from more primitive cultures, but that's what it is. So when you have these groups that have Christian rock, it's absurd. Because, okay, so you change the words to something else. The rhythms that the rhythms affect a part of your mind that is very carnal and very base. We all have that. A lot of times we have it under control. But we still have these primitive tendencies way in there. And these appeal to that. These rhythms suggest things to the rest of our body. And that's why you have to watch out for certain kinds of things, you know. Input, you know, what you watch on television. People can become very jaded when they're very unscrupulous about what they watch or what they let their children watch on TV. You know, it's like, somebody called me up today to ask me about, you know, moral questions, and they were talking about, well, okay, so what if it has these words in it, you know, and should I not see it then? And what if it has just this word? Like they were saying, okay, what if it has just the S word in it, you know? And what if, you know, if they use the F-bomb but only once, you know, there was these very specific questions. And I said, well, first of all, I would draw the line for, you know, and I said I would draw the line at certainly the use of the holy name as an expletive. If I knew that was in the movie, I would, even if they did it once, I would never go anywhere near that. Now, if it's a movie about World War II and somebody says the S word a couple of times in the whole movie, okay, I can get that. But there are a lot of these movies that use language completely gratuitously that's bad. And that's degrading to it. You know, and I told him, I said, I don't remember seeing a movie that had any swearing. Certainly, Star Wars doesn't. Well, I mean, I'm very selective too. Lord of the Rings it went, how many hours with no bad words whatsoever. The Hobbit, no swear words there. All these things. So you have to watch it. You have to keep your guard up. And I said to him, and as I just put it out there, you say, well, I want to see this movie, but it has all this language in it. Well, what's forcing you to see that movie? I don't understand. What obligation do you have to go see that? And the answer is you don't have any. There's nothing forcing you to see it, so go read a good book. I don't read books with bad words in them, and it's not the kind of book I buy. So I happen to know there are plenty of books with no raciness, whether it be language or action or anything. So.
Do you remember the classification of movies years ago? A1, A2, A3, B, C,
Oh yes.
Yeah,
the B's were semi-vulgar, but not really bad words much. Cowboy movies and stuff like that got a little, So that was much stricter.
yes.
I mean, they didn't even have a letter of the alphabet for the stuff we have now. They had to go into the Greek or Chinese or something like that to give those ratings. That was a different thing. Okay, so just remember the sixth commandment in Monsignor. TV shows or websites, remember garbage in, garbage out. What you put into your soul, what you allow into your soul through your senses will affect your soul. That's all you have to remember. And considering your soul is your most precious possession that you want to, try going in and stealing the crown jewels of England. I don't know, has anybody ever been to see the crown jewels of England? Okay. So they're kept in the Tower of London, right? So the Tower of London, first of all, you have to cross a river to go there in the moat. And then you have to go through, tunnels and mazes around 20-foot thick stone walls, yada, 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 guys with submachine guns all over the place. And then behind 6-inch thick glass in the very middle of it are the crown jewels, and the guys with machine guns or whatnot keep you moving through the line. You can't even stand there and look at them for more than a few seconds, all right? And that's just for basically a bunch of carbon, and some gold and stuff like that. So think about your soul. Now, your one soul is worth infinitely more than the whole pile of pretty carbon and other elements that make up the crown jewels of England. Okay, what are you going to do for security for that soul? So think of everything that comes through your senses as potential thieves for the jewels. Think of the potential impact on your treasure for everything that comes in, and then you'll get it, so that depends then how much you value your soul, and you'll start to be a little bit more selective, right? I mean, even on the way over here, I was thinking, because I had turned on the news station for a minute, I just wanted to see what they had to say about the weather for the next week or so. And then start getting into these stupid stories about Bill Cosby and stuff, and I'm like, what am I doing? So I put it on the classical music. I have two buttons. The other one's KUSC, the classical music station. That got pushed right away. But even the news, it's like telling us what's going on with Bill Cosby and these other, maniacs and stuff. It says, I don't need to hear that, and neither does I think anybody else. It's just sensationalism. All right, so then there's the ninth, which is thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. The ninth commandment specifically forbids wanting someone else's spouse in a married way, and by extension for a married person to want a single person in this manner. It also, now want is more like sincerely desired. It doesn't mean that you can't look at, somebody's date and going, she's really pretty, wow, and getting carried away in your mind for maybe a split second. That's not the same thing as seriously desiring to have your neighbor's wife or girlfriend when you're not in a state to be wanting seriously something like that. So it's not, wanting is another one of those words we can use a restricted or a more broad definition of. So it forbids all willful consent to impure thoughts and desires, and all willful pleasure in irregular, sinful sexual promptings or emotions of the thought. Now, willful is the key word here. Now, please listen to me. You will save yourself a lot of agony when it comes to your confessions, okay? Bad thoughts, including the most vile, filthy, sexual things only Satan could imagine, can pop in your head without anything that you've done to prompt it or to deserve it in any way. That is not the sin. That's called a temptation. Satan does that, but it doesn't have to be Satan though, because there are times when we've seen something we shouldn't have seen, and it's in the hard drive, unfortunately, and those things you can hit the replay button in just some random moment, and then you have it all over again. So that is not the sin. Even the worst thought you can think of is not the sin in itself. The sin is willfully having that thought and entertaining it. Entertaining it means you purposely thinking about it, okay? So the question is, did you entertain the sin? That doesn't mean to do a tap dance or something, to see how the sin would make it. It means, did you take the ball and run with it, in a sense? You were given this temptation. Did you derive pleasure from it? It's like the old joke. It's not very scandalous, or I wouldn't say it, but the guy goes into the confessional and confesses bad thoughts. And the priest said, well, did you entertain them? And he says, no, Father, but they sure did entertain me. So, that's entertaining. So what sins commonly lead to the breaking of the sixth and ninth commandments? Now, when they talk about the sins that lead to it, what they mean is sins that make it easier for the sins against the sixth and ninth commandment to happen. That facilitate it, in a sense. Oh, I'm running over. Okay, half time and we'll come back. Okay, so that was the ninth commandment. We go into the next chapter.